Hello, my name is Crystal Farina, and I am an alumna of the 2015 NLN Simulation Educators Cohort. I'm here to talk to you today about designing a simulation center. By the time you're done watching this video, you will be able to discuss space and the purpose of that space for a simulation center, what you're going to need in the space, such as equipment, and then how you will make your simulation center grow. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about the purpose and your space. Before you ever begin, you need to think about how your simulation center is going to be used. Is the space something that is allocated from or repurposed from space that's already there? For example, if you're in a hospital setting or a practice setting or even a college setting, that the space is kind of an old classroom, maybe it's a closet. It's something with four walls that they're going to repurpose for simulation use. Sometimes that can be frustrating because you didn't get any voice in the design. However, it does give you the basics to start with. It gives you the four walls to begin. And that actually can be very uplifting because you can be creative and kind of think outside the box. The other thing that you need to think about when it's space is if you're designing something from the ground up, that takes time, usually 2 to 3 years, with lots of discussion, and all of this simulation needs to be a collaborative effort for all of the people that are going to be involved to use this space. You also need to think about the location, where it's going to be in regards to equipment, the design of how you're going to design that space, and you need to make sure you plan an area for storage. One of the biggest problems that we have in simulation is that usually there is not enough storage. So every piece of equipment has to have its place to be put away. Okay, so that's your space. Make sure you think outside the box. Think about who's going to be using it and what you're going to be doing. Next, it's what do you need? What kind of equipment do you actually need for your simulation space? Do you need oxygen to be piped in through the walls? Can you use simulated head walls that just have regular air? If it's an old hospital room that you've been allocated, that's fantastic because usually the head walls work and you have oxygen and suction. But if it's not, if it's just a classroom or a repurposed space, do you need a head wall that has the ability to have air so that students or employees can hook to suction and oxygen? So just think about those things when it comes to equipment. Also think about IVs. Do you need IV poles in there? You're definitely going to need some kind of hospital bed, or maybe an emergency room stretcher would work. Something that's versatile that can be used for multiple things. Think about some alternatives to the space. So if you have an area, if you have a big room, and one area is set up with a hospital bed, is it a possibility that another area can be set up to look similar to an apartment so that you could do simulated home health visits? When you're thinking about the different uses of the space and what equipment you need to think about what programs are going to use the space. One of the things I found is as you design something really great and you initially designed it just for one program, other groups come in and they see it and they say, oh, that's fantastic. Can I use it? And then you have to think about scheduling if you're going to let other people use it. So think about all the different flexible ways that the space can be used. Does it need to have a classroom component to it? Meaning, is there going to be a place for tables and chairs where there's some lecture or group work, and then you go to the simulation area and practice on the patient? You need to think about different simulators. Do you need expensive high-fidelity simulators, or could you use moderate fidelity simulators and some task trainers? So really think about all the different uses that you have planned for that space, who's going to use it, and what you actually need. So sit down and give that a lot of thought. If you're going to be using medications or administering medications, do you need a Pyxis or some kind of medication dispensing system? You also need to think about whether or not, or not whether or not, but how you're going to manage things like linens and doing laundry. And getting rid of medical waste such as sharps or any of your simulated IV fluids, body fluids. So you have to think about all of that take all of that into consideration when you are thinking about designing your space. And lastly, think about how you can grow this space for the future. So in the beginning, you may have been given just a room by your administration that says, here, you can make this into a simulation space. Think outside the box and think toward the future of how you can make this grow. One of the great opportunities that you have is once you develop a simulation center or a simulation space, you can actually use it as a source of revenue for your facility. So there's a couple things you can do. You can register with your local film office so that people that are filming commercials or television shows, doesn't have to be any high budget Hollywood movie. It can be just a commercial. Can come and rent your space when the students aren't there. They usually pay pretty good money to come and do commercials or episodes in a room that looks like a patient room, but then they don't have to be in a place where there are real patients. So think about that as a source of revenue. Also, think about renting your simulation space out to other community health professions so that they could use the space to provide refresher courses, courses on new equipment and new, maybe new procedures, and also just as their yearly competencies. So there is a way that your local health professions groups will come in and rent your space so that they don't have to purchase all that equipment. Really develop a strategic plan for how you want the space to grow and how you want to use it. If you're going to be renting it out for any groups, you also want to think about a business plan. What are your fees going to be? Is it a set fee just to rent the room? Or are there extra fees for the use of a simulator, task trainer, somebody to run the simulator? So really think about those options when you're developing that business plan. You also want to think about the extra requirements that are going to be needed to take care of laundry, supplies that other group might use, or any other equipment that the group may use. Okay, so really think about that when you are developing that business plan part. Think about funding. So once your simulation center is developed, or your simulation space, how is it going to be funded? Are there going to be ways to support, if you have high fidelity simulators, is there going to be funding to support the maintenance agreements? What kind of personnel are you going to need? If you have a high fidelity simulator, you're going to need somebody to actually run the simulation scenarios, some sort of sim tech. That may be you. You may be running the simulation center and be the sim tech. But think about the personnel that you're going to need, because that also contributes an expense to the center. You also want to think about who's going to own the center. So who's going to run it, who's going to be in charge of keeping it clean, making sure equipment is up to date, working, and is readily available, and who's going to be responsible for cleanup and setup. So all of those things will help you with the growth of your simulation center. So as we discussed, we talked about the purpose of the space. Where is it going to be? How much space do you need? And think about how creative you can be with the design. Plan for multiple programs to use it, even though it may have been given to you. In planning for those multiple programs, think about what you need. What kind of equipment needs do you have? And where can you borrow equipment, use refurbished equipment, or really think about what kind of equipment that you actually need? And lastly, think about growing it for the future. How can you make your simulation center grow and become a revenue source? If you can prove to your administration that it can become a revenue source, they are more likely to allocate more space and let you develop a simulation center from the ground up. I hope you've enjoyed this session and have a great day. Thank you.